Breaking news hot off the press. The Raptors are making some moves. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Talk Raptors. I'm your host Seshan, my channel where you get reviews, analysis, predictions, and hot takes on all things Raptors as well as some NBA. So it's been a while before since Raptors have done something out of the ordinary. And they finally did something today, and it just broke a while back that the Raptors are starting their off-season moves. So without further ado, let's talk about what the Raptors just did. The Raptors have fired Nick Nurse, the head coach. Let me first of all say this. Thank you, Nick Nurse, for your services. You were very important in 2019 in us getting that championship, because when we were down 2-0 against the Bucks, your defensive scheme of building the wall, which everybody in the NBA now uses against Giannis, and then in the finals where you played a box and one on Steph Curry to throw him off of his game, those were amazing moves. You coached well, but it seemed like after the moves, when you didn't have a star, the coaching, the development, everything went downhill. So my opinion on this move is that the Raptors did the right thing. The Raptors were in a stalemate. I think there's also needs to be some roster moves to happen to make this team re-energize, get the city believing in it a little bit more now. But this had to start from Nick Nurse, and there were some issues with his coaching. Number one, honestly, is his lack of development of the young players. Ever since, all the draft picks, other than the people he felt favor towards, didn't really get a chance to perform, didn't get, meaningful belief in them, even if they got a short run where they struggled. It seemed like there was no benefit of the doubt given to the players, especially people like Precious Achiuwa, Gary Trent Jr., Malachi Flynn, even though I think Malachi Flynn is a bust, but that's just my opinion. Justin Champagnie, you assign somebody like Joe Weiskamp, who's supposed to be a three-point shooter, but he plays absolutely no games after he has been hired. Then it seemed like, there's other players that were signed or traded for and they got absolutely no time. Why would you not play Thad Young in a play-in game when you need veteran presence? When we were struggling and actually we were up at that time, you put him in with the bench and you let him guide everybody, right? So he didn't do that, and that also resulted in a lot of our starters getting too many minutes. That resulted in a lot of injuries. It seems like, he rode them into the ground, and it resulted in a lot of injuries. Freddie VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Gary Trent when he was starting, Scotty Barnes, and it seemed like Nick Nurse just couldn't figure it out. I think he had too much of a non-belief in the bench or even in the development of the younger guys to be able to stand by them for 10, 15, 20 games at least. And that kind of put the Raptors on a back burner in regards to where we wanted to be at this point in time. And then if you also look at his actual coaching on the floor, it seemed like his offense was pretty reliant on the fact that it's either going to be Pascal or either it's going to be Freddie VanVleet, even in shitty situations, even in, when the matchups don't work for them, he's going to put the ball in their hands and let them go to work. Now, I understand you do that for stars, but there's also sound basketball that needs to be played. And it seemed like he wasn't able to offensively coach his team well enough to get everybody involved to a point where they were developing, right? Look at Scotty Barnes. He kind of regressed, which is, it does happen to sophomore players, but why is he not slowly becoming your primary guy? Why is he not playing in the post? You're putting him on the three-point line. When you look at OG Anunoby, who can actually go get his own bucket now, he has the big body. Why is he not being given that role? Why is it always going to Pascal? And then Freddie VanVleet, you're letting him take 3-pointers like crazy. He's 1 for 12 in, so many games, and yet you're not pulling him out and putting in another point guard. Even people like, Damian Lillard and those guys are pulled out of the games when they're struggling. And Nick Nurse failed to do that, and his offense was often ISO ball rather than ball movement. Pretty much reliant on the fact that Freddie will make something happen by going to the bucket, rather than using people that are available for different roles. Like Scotty Barnes should be the guy who should be, bring the ball up and starting the offense, whereas he got Pascal to do it. Why? Why are you doing that? When Scotty Barnes is a great passer and a better ball handler. And defensively, it seems like this team has been on a decline defensively. They stopped listening to him. The schemes are broken down. He couldn't figure out the rotations for defense. And that also has to do with his rotations overall. It seemed like there were players coming in and out every freaking lineup, every freaking game. There weren't like 15, 20 games where we played the same lineup and the same bench. There was no chemistry between most of the players. Why? Because they were in and out. Now, some of it had to do with injuries, but some of it had to do with his coaching, because it seemed like other than Pascal, OG, somewhat of OG, defense because of his defensive prowess, Fred VanVleet and somewhat of Scotty Barnes is, again, same thing, his defensive prowess. Nick Nurse didn't really believe in anybody else on the roster. That has to do a little bit with management, but as a coach, you got to make it work with what you got. And honestly, the talent we do have wasn't a talent that was supposed to be in play, and it was at least a 6th seed. So unfortunately, he wasn't doing a great job. And the last thing I have a criticism about his coaching was, it seemed like as the years passed on, he became more and more frustrated, more and more concentrated on things that shouldn't matter too much. In every game, you will see him arguing with the refs, and that trickles down to all the players. They lose, they're like, okay, coach is doing it, so we need to do this. And then they lose focus on the game. As a role model, you should be focusing on, okay, that's a shitty call, let's give it a couple of games, then I will argue about it. But it seemed like in every bloody game he was doing it. And it just didn't look nice. It seemed like he was frustrated with everything. And another thing, he has never figured out when to call a timeout, especially when we were struggling. So as a coach, you gotta have those instincts. So unfortunately, I think it's a good move. I think the Raptors should be looking at somebody who's coming in. I think Adrian Griffin would be a very good coach. I think he's always had a good chemistry with the guys. He's up tempo. He's always jumping around. He's always, getting these guys motivated. So he would be a good coach. I think he's also very good in regards to his offensive and defensive plays. Ime Udoka is another person that has been considered. I think he should be given a shot. If out of those two should be the primary people that we're going after. Ime Udoka only because, in my opinion, he got a raw deal. I think if you were gonna fire him, you gotta fire both the people that were involved in that affair or whatever. But that's just another side topic there. So the Raptors are making some moves. I hope they make some roster moves as well, unless they're planning on just seeing how the coach does this order work, does his roster work, etc. But the bench needs to be strengthened. So let's see what happens in regards to that. But this was the breaking news. I hope you guys enjoyed my opinion as to whether I agree with Nick Nurse being fired or not. And I will speak to you guys at the next breaking news that comes up for the Raptors. Anyways, have a good weekend.